All right, welcome to class 3, part 2. And today we are talking about broken color. And we're just going to quickly look at some examples and also talk a little bit about what is broken color and what is optical mixing in color. And it's just a fun way to lay in our colors in a more dynamic, more exciting way. And it creates a vibrancy. So let's go ahead and do share screen and I will show you guys. Give me 1 second. It's not popping up here. Let's do share screen again. There we go. Okay, does everybody see a painting by Monet there of some rocks at the beach? All right, so we can zoom in a little bit here. Monet is probably one of the most famous impressionists, and the impressionists are given so much credit for creating broken color and the idea of optical mixing, where what it is putting two colors side by side. So when we zoom out, squinting our eyes a little bit, the painting just really feels cohesive and the colors blend seamlessly. But when we really zoom in, you can see that there's so many colors side by side, and that the brushwork is actually really quite rough. Something I do want to urge you guys to think about is whether you want to do dabs of color, or if you're doing what Monet does in most of his work. Some of his work gets really spotty, but he's really changing up his brushwork. One thing that Monet does wonderfully well too is that you can see the brushwork changing direction. So we're going to look for that, like these sideways or horizontal striations, whereas in the sky it gets more vertical or more angular. And he's really letting the brushwork give us some of the formation. So I'm going to be reading from the handout a little bit, not the whole thing, because it's like 4 or 5 pages long, but just the beginning here. What is broken color in painting, and how do the Impressionists utilize it? Additionally, what is optical mixing in painting, and how does it connect to the technique of broken color? We'll go to the next one here. Broken color in oil painting is a technique where artists use small dabs or brushstrokes of pure color applied next to each other rather than blending them on the palette or canvas. This approach allows the viewer's eye to blend the colors optically, creating a more vibrant and dynamic effect. So you guys see these really severe jumps in color here. Orange next to blue, next to pink, next to green, next to purple. But watch what happens as we zoom out. Right? Now squint your eyes at it, and they just kind of begin to blur together. There's still this vibrancy, this energy, this jumping. I don't know this artist. Bremen is the last name, but kind of a really fun piece. I believe this might, I don't actually know this. I don't even know if this is digital. I actually grabbed this one for Linda Camarada, just our angel painter here. But I just loved the warms and cools and the bouncing around of yellow to orange to pink to blues to purples. And just that transition in there is so beautiful. And look up in the hair with this dashes of all these colors.
Thank you,
I thought that
Mike.
was a really fun piece that I just happened to come across while
That's
searching
beautiful.
for some of these others.
I love
All
it.
right. The Impressionists pioneered broken color to capture the fleeting effects of light and atmosphere in their works. Rather than meticulously blending colors to create smooth transitions, they used individual strokes of pure color. For example, instead of mixing blue and yellow to make green on the palette, they placed blue and yellow strokes side by side. I don't have examples of that. letting the viewer's eyes merge them. This effect contributed to the characteristic vibrancy and spontaneity of Impressionist paintings. I believe that Alan is a pastelist, and pastelists come to this kind of technique sometimes more naturally, just because they're using pre-mixed colors. And so a lot of the mixing is done optically, just putting the colors side by side. This is Anton Pavlenko here. And he does optical mixing. And but what one of the things he does is, if we notice in here, he doesn't over mix his colors. He swirls them together on his palette, loads up his brush, and then within the brush stroke, you've got all these different colors laid side by side. So that's another technique that I really would love to experiment more with. It's just loading the brush up with not fully mixed colors. And you guys can kind of see that in each one of those strokes.
Yeah. I love the shadows. Ooh.
But yeah, just looking at this like thick, juicy.
That's not palette knife?
No, he's a brush painter, but he really loads up. Here's one that he did kind of a wipe away to start with, or a much thinner transparent painting, and then loaded up over the top, but let some of those colors really show through, and then really got thick and juicy in areas where the light's coming through. So he's letting his shadows stay thin, but areas of light really are loaded up. I mean, so loaded up that the brush strokes are actually casting their own shadows. And here's where I'm talking about, where in one brush stroke, he's got all these colors and striations going on. It's another one of Anton Pavlenko's. So some of his work is super dynamic. And even just like up in here, look at all these colors within one brush stroke. Claude Monet. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question.
Please.
The handout said that it was, the paint's right from the tube. All right, what about these pastels? You don't get those straight from the tube unless you are working with a pre-mixed paint.
Right. And there's not many painters that painted straight out of the tube. There's, Van Gogh, of course, did a lot of painting right out of the tube. But I think like this Renoir is, all these colors are mixed. But what's going on is he's putting them all so close together. But he's keeping, like, this is the shadow side, the mid value side, and the light side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the values really come into play. So yeah, I mean, when I say pure color, I guess I mean kind of like pure of what you mix. Oops, shoot. Just hopefully this pops back up. Are you guys seeing a very foggy painting? Okay, great. So this is a Brent Cotton. And you would think, like, looking at it, like everything is soft and blended, and but when we zoom in, he's just doing very subtle shifts back and forth between his colors. Look at the little bits of pink bouncing around within the grays and greens, and and we get down into here, and it's a lot of just colors side by side by side. Hopefully that's showing up on your guys' monitors. I don't know. And this is Charlottetown from, I think, Boston, but I'm not positive. But I just love, I mean, I would not be brave enough to paint this, but just such vibrancy. And then look down in the reflections. It almost just looks like chaos. Just breaks to pieces, but watch what happened when you zoom out. All of a sudden it feels like warm light. Yeah, he's normally a much more tighter, more representational painter than this, but I found that one really interesting just to see how he's really working these broken colors. Let me go to a Claude Monet real quick. It's another child who saw him, but I guess we can look at this one, even though we're going to be talking about Monet here. But he's using a lot of the techniques that I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't borrow from the French Impressionists, even though he's American East Coast Impressionist. Claude Monet, one of the most famous Impressionists, often used a broken color to depict the shimmering effects of light on water.
The fire out there.
Isn't that interesting? Just all these colors side by side by side by side. But then as you zoom out, how they really feed into each other and feel cohesive.
Do you
Zoom
think that
into
that's
the
done
shadows.
quickly, or is that done, carefully and calculating?
I can't tell you. I've done both ways. It's harder to do, wet into wet into wet because, the colors are going to start mixing on the canvas. But it's possible by fluctuating and adjusting the amount of paint we're using, going thicker and thicker, also adjusting the pressure of, as we apply the paint. You're just going to be barely touching, barely skimming the canvas. So you got to load that brush up and just touch the canvas with it, and the paint will come off your brush. And you can really lay wet into wet. If you start scrubbing or touching the canvas too many times before reloading or cleaning it off, you will definitely start to blend your colors. But look at all these colors.
Do you
All
think he
within a
let it
layer.
dry some? Do you think he let one layer dry and then applied another?
I can't tell you. I don't know.
I
But
know. You mean you don't know Monet?
I don't know Child Assam. I don't know Monet. But by looking at some of Monet's work, up close and in the galleries, he definitely was painting in layers time to time. But I can't tell you if there was times like when this was painted, because this looks all thick. A lot of Monet's paintings have thin, transparent areas and thick areas, especially when he was doing his water lily series. This looks all fairly thick and impasto. This area here looks a little thinner in the purples. So maybe his shadows are a little thinner in the cools, but then the warms and the lights really get thick and juicy. But you guys see that all the colors just side by side, but it's so watch as this pink becomes the yellow, becomes the blue, and he's letting them overlap and become side by side. And it creates a transition optically.
And it's all the same value.
That's going to be one of the big things that I really want you to pay attention to. That's what we were talking about when we were looking at Lisa's painting, was that you were doing broken color, but your values were jumping around in your shadows and stuff a lot. Optical mixing. Optical mixing is something that I probably try to do more often, where I'm trying to put multiple colors side by side, but when viewed from a distance, become a third color. And it's amazing what the brain will do if we just trust our viewers to fill in these spaces or to make these things happen. So optical mixing is closely related to broken color. It refers to how our eyes blend individual colors when viewed from a distance, creating a new perceived color. This phenomena is known as is the basis for techniques like pointillism and divisionism, where artists apply small dots of patches of color that mix optically. Broken color relies on this principle to achieve its effects, as the separate strokes or dabs of color blend in the viewer's perception rather than being physically mixed on the canvas. Just love all these warms in here. And then here's a great example of in the cool areas. You guys see how this is just such a calm, quiet piece, but because of the vibrancy and energy in this, it just bounces, right? Our eyes just almost can't focus. And then when we squint our eyes or view it from a distance, all of a sudden we get these transitions of the in-betweens. And then look at the bridge here and how we have orange and blues and grays and greens all side by side. But when we get close, it's almost chaos. So I like to learn from these paintings, but I wouldn't want to paint a painting that looks like this, me personally. I do love Impressionism and I'm inspired by it, but I try to learn, like, what are the effects? What's going on? What can I use from these lessons in my own pieces that I can do to make them more dynamic, more exciting, include the viewer more into the piece? But at the same time, I'm not into pointillism. I'm not into,
Look at the difference in his brush strokes too. His
this is
his
almost like
bridge,
pointillism.
his bridge are vertical and the water is horizontal.
Very good. Yeah, exactly right. And then look at this. So this is broken color or optical mixing, and so is this, right? But Eric Bowman here is using some big, thick, juicy strokes, much bigger. He's not breaking it up into 1,000 little pieces. But what he is doing is allowing these subtle transitions to bounce around. And Eric is not afraid to do graphic things, like things that I wouldn't think to do, like putting this dark blue line underneath or just really conveying. He's also using unmixed paint together on his brush to make these different swirls of color. He's also letting the undercolor, the underdarks, show as he lightly places the paint on top. You guys see that? So little specks of those darks that were painted thinly are showing through. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. It's not just, I don't want you guys just to paint like Monet or pointillist or whatever else. But what I want you to see is, like, as transitions go, he didn't just blend this and blend that. He's letting them kind of bounce in and around and amongst each other. Look at the yellows going into the oranges, going into the pinks, going into the purples, going into the grays, right? There's just all this kind of bouncing back and forth. Now they're Bowman painting.
That looks like a quilt.
Yeah. Eric likes harder edges than I typically would paint. Almost all he's definitely got a graphic quality to his paintings. But they're beautiful. But I just love what's going on up in here. I mean, all of it. See all these just swirls of colors going on amongst each other.
I
Look at
love
these greens bouncing around inside the oranges and pinks, like so bold and brave. But when we look at the piece as a whole, because of the values, because of the temperatures, it really holds together nicely, doesn't it?
it's beautiful.
This is Eric Jacobson. I think maybe some of you guys have even taken classes with him.
Yes,
I-
I have.
Yeah, great painter, really nice guy. But yeah, he just doesn't blend on the canvas hardly ever. He just really mixes on his palette, puts them down, mixes on his palette, puts them down, just thick and juicy. And he just sits down with his legs crossed and he just looks so relaxed, like he's just having a easy time of it. And gosh, you see the dynamicism, but at the same time, how it just holds together. It's not hitting you overhead that there's all these things going on. Also letting the underpainting or the whatever he put underneath show through in areas to kind of tie in the painting, to kind of key it in. Another Eric Jacobson. And a lot of times these paintings will look very spontaneous, and Eric does paint a lot of all prima paintings, so I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't, do all this in one sitting. But look at all the color in that sky. Again, when we squint down, squint your eyes at it.
Does
It's
he have
just
a palette knife, Michael?
nope, all brush.
Well,
Watching the different angles of the paint. This is Erin Hansen. She actually lives about a town away from me now. You can look up her work if you're really into dynamic, impressionist, modern painting. Erin, and then Hanson, Hanson. And she just, yeah, she does some super vibrant, super expressive, really thick. She's really into the texture of the brush stroke, really leaving it showing. Yeah, we're able to visit her studio a couple times, and it's a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, I might see her tomorrow.
Oh yeah,
Um, there's a big art fair in Indio down here in the desert starting tomorrow, and her work and Teresa Saya from Bainbridge Island.
yeah. I was gonna say she's Seattle area. Yeah,
They're two prominent artists that are usually down here in the desert.
yeah, good. I think she used to have a gallery down there, but I'm not sure. And she had one in Carmel as well, but I think she's kind of consolidated.
Both those women just about sell out every time they show up.
Yeah, and her prices, you could add a zero to all my paintings.
Yeah, I mean, you know, $15,000 to $20,000 is not uncommon for Aaron.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen some $60,000 and $90,000 paintings. This is Glenn Dean. He for the longest time very much looked like Edgar Payne paintings, but he's changing up a little bit, but he's still really using these broken strokes. But what I want to show you is the sky is so delicate compared to what we've been looking at, but he's still using this broken color, right? So it doesn't need to be beating you over the head.
I like the grass.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
I like everything about it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, definitely look at some of his newer work. It's really nice. I don't know if I have another one of his. Yep, I do.
What was his name again, Michael?
Glenn, Glenn, Dean, Dean. Yeah, and he's done a pretty seismic style shift lately, but I really liked his old work and I really like his new work. And just yeah, I love his use of optical mixing. I mean, putting these light kind of minty greens next to these pinks is just electric.
It is.
But at the same time, as you go back, because the values hold so together, it's just subtle. Up here, he's got pinks in his sky next to his blues. But again, they just hold together so well. I'm looking at her, I don't know if that's an apron or whatever, but
I think so.
yeah, beautiful work that he's doing. This is a Granville Redmond painter I really like.
That's beautiful.
Isn't that nice?
That looks like
So, I mean, you can be earthy, you can be super colorful like Erin Hansen, you can be all over the place with broken color, but it just creates a dynamicism and a sense of movement that's, I think I could really learn from. This is more like almost like this is Henry Martin. I think it's almost like pointillism, right? Like every brush stroke kind of feels like the one before, like dot, 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 dot. Not my style, but it's still fun to see how a piece like this, again, squint your eyes and the painting just becomes like a normal naturalistic painting. And then as we zoom in, you can really see how everything's broken. It's just used by so many artists in so many different ways. So I just want you to be aware, if your values and your temperatures kind of hold true, you can really get some beautiful dynamicism in your pieces. Joaquin Sorolla, these are a bunch of his sketches. Joaquin Sorolla is probably one of my very favorite painters. Again, these are probably just quick sketches where he's just trying to capture the energy and the light and the shadows of a painting. These are probably little tiny sketches. Oh, sorry, this one resolution's really lousy. I just love the lights and the darks, the shadows and the warms. Oh, there we go. Okay.
I like that.
That's gorgeous.
Isn't it just so, I mean, it feels slapdash in a way, like they're just urgently trying to get the information before the light changes too much. But I have no idea of, how much they're working in the studio on top of these paintings. Yeah, and Joaquin Sorolla just did lots of little sketches of these rocks.
Oh,
Ken Elliott, and I just loved these transitions from the blues to the greens to the purples. And here we're not seeing the individual brush strokes, are we, as much? There's just kind of areas of color. The brush strokes are a little softer. They're not as thick and dabby. Kevin McPherson, living painter, has written a couple books, teaches workshops. Love this one.
oh, God.
Mm.
Love how the light's traveling across, and I just am infatuated with this foreground. I mean, that is just an abstract, weird painting, right? When we look at it close. And you see how it holds, again, squinting our eyes. See how the foreground, even in the shadow, gets a little warmer, and then it gets a little cooler where it's reflecting the light off the cool side of the sky, and then we get into the lights.
Wow.
Who's that artist?
Kevin McPherson. I think his first book was called Painting with Light, which is pretty apropos for this painting. Beautiful colors. So Matt Smith would be probably considered more of a realist, a little more tight and rendery. But if we still look closely, you can really see how he's utilizing, look at these striations and movement, and a real sense of, the different forms being created by the warms and the cools. And look into this bush here. Look at all the purples that are being caught within these cool greens. And then
Wow.
comparing that to where the plant's getting a
Makes
little
you
more light.
wonder what order he does that in. I mean, he doesn't sit there with 4 brushes of different colors and then just go back and forth. There has to be a method to it.
We might.
Really?
Yeah, I bet you he has a brush for his lights, a brush for his cools, a brush
Well,
for
yeah, but I mean, what order he does that in? I don't know how else to explain it.
right. And I'm trying to remember. I've watched a couple videos with him, and I've watched him do a demo. But he mostly is talking about his design, how he really locks that in, even if it's just a couple gestural strokes, because you can see all these angles coming in. And I think he does do darks and then kind of keeps them thinner. Yeah, it looks like he's painting from darks out to lights and layering
Mhm.
some of these on top. You can see the light on this looks like the last stroke. But look at that vibrant sky. And then look what he's still using broken brush strokes, even in his sky where they're not all mixed. He's just gradating as he goes up, but he lets them bounce around within each other. This is that Maynard Dixon that I was showing you, who Maynard Dixon's not known too much as an impressionist typically, but sure was bringing in a lot of color this day and lots of interesting warms and cools. I mostly just grabbed this painting for myself because I'd never seen it before. I just thought it was really interesting that he made a green Indian with bright yellows. And yeah, I have no idea, if this was his finished painting or what, but I thought it was really fun. Michael Malm, just he does again just the difference. Like, look at these hard structured brush strokes, thin, delicate brush strokes, and then these big, swirly, long movements. I just love how he's utilizing so many different ways of moving the painter, and he does go ahead and soften some edges. Yeah, if you get a chance, look at Michael Malm's work. He does a lot of these kind of figures, softly lit figures that are just elegant and pretty. And I just love that within this shadow, we've got, again, all the colors: yellow, blue, purple, green, pink, red, orange. But yet they hold together. And in fact, this piece can be so very quiet, but it's not. It has movement and motion and energy, even though it's a very quiet, subtle piece.
His last name is spelled M-U-M-M.
Malm.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. All right. So this is a very famous Monet, Waterloo Bridge here.
Same bridge as before, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe not.
But look at that chaos of color. But as we zoom out and squint our eyes down at it, it starts to fall together and really get another Monet. I think this is one that Gail was talking about last week. So look at how warm the reds are in the shadows, right? Who would think to put those into a shadow? But because they're dark and cooler than the reds along the edge and the warm oranges and reds that are catching the light, they read so well. And then this area is really funny because it's so blue. It almost feels kind of off to me a little bit, but it's reflecting the blue of the dome of the sky versus the warms. And then I love the shadows, just that bouncing light coming through. It just feels like light hitting a rough field, like a textured surface, right? Bounces and moves. This is one of Monet's first, I think maybe the painting where the word impressionism came from. And it was supposed to be a rude thing. When a critic looked at the painting, he's like, it's just an impression of a thing. Not one of my favorite paintings by any means. I actually kind of don't like it that much, but I love the fact that, Monet kind of did this maybe as kind of a, argument with what was expected of him. But then he really took it and just ran with it.
I like his sense of color.
Yeah. So this is Nikolai Feshin. Oh man, if you ever get a chance to see his work in person, a Russian painter, just unbelievable. Just movement and structure and just lost and found, and just so good. I'm going to read a quote from him. To avoid murky results, it is necessary to learn how to use the three basic colors and to apply them layer upon layer in such a way that the underlying color shows through the next application. For instance, one can use blue paint and apply it over some red in such a manner that the blue and the red are seen simultaneously, and thus produce the impression of a violet vibration. Let's look even closer. Look at all these colors. If in the same careful manner one puts upon his first combination a yellow color, a complete harmonization is reached, and the colors are not mixed but built one upon the other, retaining the full intensity of their vibrations. This is one of Nikolai Feshin's landscapes. looks like chaos, doesn't it? So he is definitely not painting things. He is painting shapes, values, and colors. And then they tie in together and become what looks like a very structural tree, land. Ovanus Barbarian. And he does the mixed brush strokes as well, where he doesn't over mix his colors. He uses big brushes. He just gets so much vibrancy in his color. Another Ovanus Barbarian. Paul Signac, very much more like a pointillist, but squint your eyes. I don't like this painting, but it's fun to see. And, you know, it's like almost just showing an example to children, right? But it's fun and it's interesting, and it really helps us to kind of visualize how this works. Like, look what's going on back here, right? See these transitions?
And that's hard to wrap your head around when you're trying to do it.
Oh yeah,
It'd drive me
for
nuts.
sure.
That's why I was wondering if they were slow and calculated with their brush strokes.
I would guess
They
that one was
really-
slow and calculated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty.
Here's, you know, a complete opposite almost, right? Very atmospheric and soft edged.
That looks
But
like
at the
it could be
same time-
yours, Michael.
What's that?
That one looks like it could be yours.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I'm more interested in, is lost and found edges. And this one I love. This is by Pinkham. But I love just these colors down here. You know, and it's very much leads the eye through the piece. But at the same time, you have these beautiful jumps and bounces and movement in the color. Tom Thompson, one of the Canadian Seven, the 8th member of the Canadian Seven or Canada Seven. Yeah, just such a nice combination in the grays and then the warms and the reflections. Of course, you got to have Starry, Starry Night if you're going to have broken color or optical. Well, it's not so much optical mixing, just broken color. But, you know, no collection of Impressionist paintings is complete until you've shown a Monet and a Van Gogh, I guess. All right. Any questions about that?
Nope.
Are these going to be on Padlet?
I've added a bunch of them to Padlet already. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take another little short break, and I will jump to the canvas. And for those of you who, you know, it's already 12:45. So if you want to keep hanging out, I'm going to go down and check on the family. My wife, I think, is going to go take care of my mother-in-law here in a little bit. So I'll go check in and see if she needs any help. And I'll be back up in about 5 to 10 minutes and do a demo. It will be recorded if you're not able to continue on for the rest of your life, I mean day, while I do my demo. And yeah, any questions though before we go about with the handout of broken color and optical mixing? Did that do a pretty good job of kind of explaining the theory and the idea behind it?
Yep.
And your homework is to do a painting using those ideas. If you wanted to do, you know, a value study and then just kind of base it on that, that may help you. What I'll probably do is a mother color kind of to harmonize a little bit, or a couple mother colors, and then break those down a little bit in my demo. All right.